Hello, and welcome to the Kelcast, the Hearthstone Arena podcast, where we try to get better without cursing. I'm Keldar, a longtime Infinite Arena leaderboard player and streamer on Twitch. Joining me as my co-host is another Infinite player, Kellen Abel. Remember, if you want to find us on social media, you can search Keldar on Twitch, YouTube, or Twitter. That's Keludar, or you can search the Kelcast on Google to find or listen to the podcast anywhere you'd like. All right, Kellen, so what are we going to talk about this week?
Well, today we're going to go a little more generic. We're not going to stick strictly to Hearthstone, although this does apply to Hearthstone. But we're going to talk about how to go from a casual player to a competitive player. A lot of people we've talked to in the past have started off playing an arena here or there. They're mostly a standard player or a wild player, and they've never ventured into the competitive realm of Hearthstone Arena. So this is a way to get into that, or a way to get into competitive. I don't know, TFT, or being more competitive in standard Hearthstone, or really any game at all. These are just some strategies that are simple, easy to understand, and easy to implement that can get you better at a game so that you can compete on the higher levels.
Yeah, and I think it's cool because this does apply to any game. And I think sometimes you find a game that you're passionate about and, you're just playing it and all of a sudden you're like, oh, like I want to be better at this game or I want to be the best. And then we're going to talk about kind of that process. And Kellen and I both have kind of a different background and how we kind of got to the same point. So we'll start it off. All right. Why don't you start off, Kellen?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple steps you need to take. And the first step, and honestly, it's super obvious what the first step is. It's very clear that the first thing you need to do if you want to get better at a game is to play more. You just need to play more hours. There's the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing. There's a million different, theories on what to do, but they all come back to play more of the game you want to get better at, or do more of the thing you want to improve on. If it's coding, if it's soccer, if it's, I don't know, climbing rock walls, it doesn't matter. The more you do it, you're automatically going to improve. There's a plateau on that, there's a limit, but the first step is to play more.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I always tell people, when I think about playing Hearthstone, like Arena, I'll start out by kind of talking about my journey. Now, Kellen had a little bit more of a competitive background in Magic. My background was a little bit more casual. I had a friend who was a very, very good Magic player, and he basically like gave me cards to build like 3 or 4 decks, and then we would just play those decks against each other. And he knew his decks were like insane, so he kind of built them to be competitive so we could have like fun games. And that was like some of the best fun I ever had, was just like we just played together. I wish I kind of would have gotten to a scene where eventually I would have like played on a competitive level, but I just kind of always played casually. Then when we moved to Hearthstone, we were both gravitated towards Arena, and together, like he was a much better player than me because he had so much more experience in card games than I did. But I had very weird ideas, so we had this kind of interesting co-op. If people know my channel, might know him as Lysia. He's been around for a while. He hasn't played much recently. He plays more Battlegrounds. But anyway, what was interesting was because I wasn't as experienced, I would think of these really wonky, weird plays and ideas. And that's kind of like, I think, started my style now in a certain way, is I think outside the box a lot. But really, it was just playing and playing and playing with him. And at first, I was really kind of relying on his skill and his competitiveness, but I always listened to what he said. He always talked about his thought process, and I improved from there. And then eventually, I started playing on my own. And I think that's one of the things, I guess, I don't know if you have any thoughts before I have another thing I want to talk about, but I want to go too deep into that before I keep going. What are you thinking, Kellen, about stuff?
About stuff, I think.
Well, no,
I
I mean,
think
like
I think you're right.
about
No,
starting out, I guess.
Well, I think starting out, like everybody starts from wherever they start. And some people start from having an experience with other games. Some people start from having experience in other formats. Some people start from wherever you are. But I mean, I was a constructed player in Magic for a long time constructed only player. And when I switched to limited, it was a big switch. And going from playing standard ranked to playing limited construct or limited draft or sealed or whatever it was a big step. But once I switched over, the first thing that helped me was just doing that more often. And I just think that's the most important first step, is getting involved in the community or the scene, or just drafting more.
Yeah, and one of the advantages of the Twitch environment is that I have so many people that come in my stream and they always say, I love watching Arena. I want to start to play. What do I do? They want to know, like, what's the first step? And we kind of talked about it. You just have to start playing. But one thing I wanted to talk about was that there's things like Hearth Arena, and there's ways that can kind of give you an idea of like, oh, this is the right card to take. I do like Hearth Arena for one specific reason. Now, it's not always correct, but it usually says why you're taking the card. It might say that you need a ping in your deck, you need a hard removal. So I feel like it starts to teach you the basics of things to like kind of categorize, which is good. But the thing is, I will say is there's a cap to everything. So like if you're using Hearth Arena, you can just draft what it says, and you'll learn by playing because you'll have better decks and you might get a little farther. But eventually you have to start using your own brain. So the step after playing more is you have to start actually letting that stuff go and just trying to draft decks on your own using your own intellect. And I always tell people on Twitch to watch Twitch streamers, find 3 or 4 Twitch streamers that play Arena that are people that talk about their thought process a lot and just watch them and just think about what you would do and compare it. And that's one really great way to learn. So that was just kind of,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I totally agree. So my second, and so speaking of what you're talking about
Yeah.
right now, the second point that really triggered improvement for me was listening to people who are better than me, or listening to
Yeah.
people who are better than you. It doesn't matter who you are. There's going to be someone out there that's better than you, if not at the game as a whole, at different aspects of the game. Even the best players in the game struggle on different things. Recently, Kel and I were talking about Paladin and drafting Paladin. And I honestly, after first, I mentioned that Paladin is my worst class. He told me I have to stop pressing the hero button so much. And guess what? I won my next 2 Paladin drafts at 10 and 12 wins because I stopped pressing the power button so
Well, so
much.
they
That
give
was
you
just in the last month.
yeah. Because like he was like basically, if he had like a 5, you would always be like 3 dropping a hero power instead of just playing a 5 or whatever. He wanted to get as many hero powers in as he could, just to be clear what he's saying. But
Right.
sometimes with certain classes, like, and for me, like Shaman, no matter how much, I think I just don't like the style of Shaman. And there's like cool cards in it, but no matter how much I draft it, I don't have any passion for it. Like I just like I started playing the first couple games of the draft, and I could have the most powerful Shaman deck, and I'm just like, oh my god, can I lose a few and just like move on? I guess get bored. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, so yeah,
So I think
yeah. Go ahead.
oh, there's a few ways you can do this. Listening to people who are better than you. First, you have to identify where those people are or where that information is. One of the most obvious places right now is if you're not doing well in Arena, HS Replay is just better than you. It's not a person, it's not a thing. It's just a statistical database, but you're going to be worse than the statistical database if you're not doing well in Arena. So you should
Yeah.
just go there and just draft the card that is the best card according to their information. If that's not where you're at, if you're a little better than that, then there's going to be people on Twitch, a lot of people on Twitch that have more experience. Even if you don't think they're super great at the game, they're going to be more experienced than you, and they're going to have more information than you. And it's important to listen to those people. I think some great examples are people we've co-opted with or had on our podcast in the past. People like Dreads, people like both members of the Grinning Goat or the Light Forge podcast, Isherwood, Judge, Veritas, all these people that we've discussed Hearthstone with at length on this podcast are all people that I even believe are better than me and in at least some aspects of the game, if not the game as a whole. So listening to those people is going to give you more opportunities. And honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, you're already at this step most likely. You're already
Right.
getting to that point where you're listening to people for their information and trying to apply it to your game. That for me, this happened in Magic the Gathering. I played at my house. I played at my local stores. Then I went to big tournaments. And when I started going to big tournaments, the first thing I did was try to find the best players and talk to them. That's what I did. This was before the internet had information. This was 20 something years ago. So I was just hunting people down and finding them and asking them questions. How would you build this seal deck? What card would you have drafted here? Why do you
Right.
think this card is better than that card? Is this rare even good? Things like that. And that is the first thing you need to do. So listening to people who are better than you requires you to seek those people out and requires you to ask those people questions. So if you're in Dred's chat and he makes a decision you don't understand, I would ask him. Honestly, Dreads is probably one of the best people to respond to your questions, as is Judge. I think they both do a fantastic job of interacting with their viewers and making sure that people understand why they do what they do. But just you have to be there and ask. If you're not present in the situation and you're just playing more and more and more without actively listening and actively asking, you're going to find a stale progression. So, but it's not that hard to listen, to find those people and to get information from them.
And the one great thing about the arena community, just to go off that a little bit, is that even if the streamer themselves is busy or doesn't see their message, there are so many in arena chats, particularly. Like, we're kind of like a horde of like arena streamers. There's so many top level players and streamers even in every chat. Like, I hang out in Dred's chat for at least 3 hours every night sometimes. So like, a lot of times I'll answer questions just because I'm a good player, so I know the answer too. So like, and it's really good. You'll get like discussions going on in chat. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions. That's definitely got to be just. And speaking of that, that is the thing, is like, you need to be willing to ask questions. You know, I think about this because I'm a nurse and I'm in the medical field, and every time I see a new nurse that struggles and something bad happens, it's because when they were not sure of themselves, they did not ask a question. And I hate to say that
Hmm.
people die. I mean, that's an extreme example, but I've seen bad things happen where things similar to that have happened. So like, if you're not sure about something, you should ask. And I think I bring this up a lot, but one person I'll never forget is Rusko, who goes by Master Ben Obi now. And the funny thing is when he first started, he's a number one player now. He asked so many questions. Like, I've never seen someone ask more questions in Twitch chats in my life. And he became the
Hmm.
number one player. So, that's questions are important. And, one of the best ways to learn. Is another thing is also question yourself. Like, we're going to talk about this next, when you make mistakes and when things go wrong, if you want to get better, there's so much stuff out there. You can look at your own replays, you can slow it down step by step, not even just a turn by turn, but literally like move by move. You can look through things in order and everything. you know if something didn't go right, try to go through and I try to identify, like, where did the game go wrong. And maybe you won't be able to figure it out, but you might be able to at least get close and be like, yeah, I lost this game early and I didn't have enough early game. And like, you can maybe even identify in the draft from a game like where you might have went wrong. Because I always save Hearth Arena is great because you can actually look through your draft picks again. So honestly, after this is one thing I do as a player, even now, I'm not kidding. Every single run, like for the last like years, I do my run, I go 12 or 0, whatever the result is. I always look at my draft again every single time. It's just what I do. I always look at my draft. I always think about what happened in the games and then what could have been different if I would have drafted differently. And I think that's one of the things that has made me a good drafter is I just study drafting constantly. So,
Yeah. My next biggest step that and like it kind of goes off where you're headed with that last set of comments is you need to adjust your play without being defensive. And this is the hardest thing. And I honestly paused. Oh, I paused so much of my development as a player because I was defensive about the plays I'd made previously. I remember one situation where I was playing with three friends, and one friend was right about the decision making that we
mhm.
we went back and we reviewed what we'd done in a draft that we all did together. And the three of us agreed because we were happy with the play we'd made, and we were unwilling to listen to our fourth friend. By the way, our fourth friend went on to be a professional game designer. He's worked at Blizzard, worked at Riot, worked at Wizards of the Coast. The
Wow.
fourth friend, who was right, we were unwilling to listen to his reasoning, and it was so frustrating for him because all we were doing was being defensive. It was
Mhm.
completely incorrect. We were just being defensive about the play we had made because we didn't want to be wrong. And that is just the most atrocious approach to getting better at anything. It doesn't matter if you're talking about magic or your profession. You need to be open to criticism and open to allowing yourself to have been wrong and
Mhm.
adjusting your play without being defensive about the plays you've made in the past. It's hard. Honestly, it's emotionally hard. It's difficult to be vulnerable. It's difficult. I mean, this is becoming more normalized these days with people being more open about their feelings
Right.
and more will. But still, there is an element of I think I did it right, and if I all and you can get down on yourself like, well, I'm always doing it wrong. Well, that's fine. But what's more important than doing it wrong uh, is making a change that you can do it right. It's easy to do something wrong 25 times. It's really hard to see that, change it, and do something right one time. But if you're not open to being to adjusting your play, then you're going to have a really hard time making improvements and you're going to, again, plateau and get stuck at a specific spot. So adjusting your play without being defensive about plays you've made is, I think, is extremely important to
Yeah.
making to getting better.
And a small like branch off of you saying adjusting your play is also, we talked about this in another one. I think it's episode 6. I recommend going to it because it's one of my favorite things. It's called "It's Never Always Principle." But yeah, I think you can apply it to this, which is, you don't approaching game. This is like game theory, like approaching games where like this is always the right decision and this is it, is going to get you stuck and make you plateau. But if you look at your gameplay, sometimes I even look at games and I'm like, I could have won if I would have went this direction too, or I could have gone this direction. And maybe sometimes I think people get stuck on worrying about what is the right draft pick and the right thing instead of focusing on like basically going with the motion of like, while the game is going on, what are you doing and how are you thinking, and stuff like that. Because it's more than just making the right decision. Sometimes it's just staying calm in the moment, or it's not getting frustrated after a game, or knowing when you need to take a break, because you got frustrated. Something I've learned actually over the last year, because I've gotten frustrated a lot. I had a pretty bad stretch at one point, and I learned one time I just took a week off and I came back and I was good. Sometimes you just need to take a step away from the game too. So adjusting your
Yeah.
play is important, especially there's usually a point where players are like, and I'll guess I'll bring up Arena only because that's what the podcast is about. But no, but I wanted to apply to everything. But this
Right.
applies to all games. But like, you get to a point where you're above average, you're very good, right? And you want to get, but people normally when they're starting that thing, they want to get to like the expert level, like they want to be
Right.
known as good and the best. To get from like very good and above average to like elite or great, you have to be willing to like really like open yourself up and try hard and like, also learn how to like work with yourself better and stuff like that. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And the final, well, I think one of the last steps that it takes, and there's a lot of little details that need to come in past this, but you have to be patient. Uh, if you watch an Olympic gymnast, and I'm using this example because it's so close to my own profession, but if you watch an Olympic gymnast, uh, they have spent 10 to 20 years training basic skills. They show up to that competition, the Olympic competition, and they have practiced handstand positions for probably thousands and thousands of hours, just handstand positions. They don't even do a handstand in most of their routines anymore, but they pass through the position so frequently that it is a important detail that they spend thousands of hours on.
Mhm.
And being patient when it comes to games is the same. Yes, I might have decided that I make mistakes when I draft Paladin, but it's going to take 40 drafts before I see 4 Paladins or 7 Paladin drafts. And that's going to take patience. I need time to make changes like that. I need time to make play decisions about drafting curve. I need time to both implement the changes that I see I need to make and see the results of those. It's really hard to decide I need to be a better curve drafter, look at my curve every draft, and then play 2 drafts that I don't do well in, and then evaluate how well I'm doing. That's not fair to myself. If I look at the next 2 drafts I do after I decide curve is my problem, I'm not giving myself a valid sample size. I'm not actually trying my new strategy out. I'm not really doing anything. I'm giving myself 2 drafts, and then if I'm disappointed in myself for not winning those 2 drafts, I've hindered my progression as a player.
Right.
So yes, it is important that you adjust your play, but once you've decided to adjust your play, you have to be patient and make sure that the adjustments that you're making are going to, I don't know, have a chance to affect your overall win rate. We're looking at a game that has I mean, if you're averaging 7 wins, you're a 70% winning player. That means 30% of the time you're going to win. If you're at 70% winning, you're on the leaderboard already. So let's say you're at 50% winning your games, if you're winning 50% of your games, then you need a lot of time to adjust 2 to 3%. 2 to 3% over a large sample size is dozens of games, hundreds of games potentially. So it's going to take time. You're going to need to be patient in order to let that time pass, and you're going to need to be consistent with
Right.
making the adjustments that you've found in your play.
Yeah.
That's all I got, Kel. I think those are my four big steps. Play more, listen to people who are better than you, adjust your play, be willing to adjust your play without being defensive, and be patient.
Oh,
I think if you
I had
follow
one that I
those,
wanted. I did think of a number 5. Now this might not.
oh,
This
what's your number
it
five?
might.
I want to
This
hear it.
actually might be more in the middle, but this is really important to me. This is actually maybe. I hate to like trounce your list, but this actually to me might be the most important thing. When I think back my journey of playing, which is to set realistic goals for yourself. And the reason, what I mean is like, you're going to start out as like, I am just learning to play Arena. I'm looking at Hearth Arena, right? I'm like just drafting and playing. But like, if your goal is to be like, a 7.5 win player, which believe me is not difficult, there's only every leaderboard, there's only like 15 people that get above 7.5. Just to give you like an idea in the world that, well, I mean, those are the ones that are doing 30 runs. But, you know, so like set a goal of like, I'm going to learn to draft more tempo and focus on curve and see how that goes. And I'm going to focus on that alone and just see what happens. And then maybe your next goal is like, well, I'm going to try to see if I can improve my average with this certain class or like this, my average overall. But I think setting really like small realistic goals is really important, because if you try to just be like, if you focus on the end goal too quickly, you're going to get frustrated and you're going to lose. It's kind of like if you do dieting, right? It's the same thing. People like get frustrated and they quit because they go for like, oh, if I don't lose, 20 pounds in a month, and like I didn't succeed. You know what I mean? That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. So,
Hmm. I agree with that. Yeah, each one of these can have each one of these steps can have small goals up within it too. It's important to be realistic about what you're doing.
yeah. And just to reiterate, like I said, we said play more, listen to people who are better than you, willing to adjust play without like being defensive, be patient with yourself, and also like set realistic goals. I think those are very simple things that you can do. And this applies to not just Hearthstone Arena, but any game. I think about this with like a game like Hades. Like I really got into Hades and I want to get back into it. And I kind of want to get competitive with it at some point. Like I haven't really had time to do that, but that's like a goal of mine, is to like get to become like better than just casual at it. So any last
Hmm.
thoughts, Kellen?
Uh, Play more of the game that you want to get better at. I think that's just the
Yeah.
first step. It's hard to do. I know that we're all limited, especially with work kicking back in and having to commute again. But the more you can play, the better you're going to get, as long as you're focusing on what you're doing.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for the 29th episode of the Kelcast. Remember, you can join us live 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific every week on Twitch, or you can download the podcast wherever you get them every Monday. You can also find me on Twitch, where I stream daily. Not exactly 7 a.m. Eastern. I usually stream in the mornings. That could be actually changing soon, just by the way, because I might be getting a job. But you can also can find me on YouTube or Twitter by searching Keludar. That's Keludar. Make sure to tune in next week, where this time we're definitely going to talk about the meta more. We'll talk about like what classes are succeeding, what classes are failing, maybe some cards that we're surprised by, or cards that are not doing as well. But again, thanks to John Laux for the intro and outro music. It makes the podcast feel like real and fun, and makes it rememberable. I love it. I love the fact that there's like cool music with it. That's really
Me
fun.
too.
And
Me too.
remember, you can Google the
Oh,
Kelcast. Whoa,
oh,
whoa,
oh
whoa,
my
whoa,
God.
whoa, whoa. Okay.
So I didn't realize this connection until just now. The person who was the fourth member of that group of drafters,
Uh-huh.
that was John Laus, the guy who's worked for all
Oh.
those companies. That's
Oh.
who that was, the guy who wrote
Oh,
those
okay, like a
songs.
little tie-in here. Okay, I
Yeah,
like it. I got
that's
it.
so
I got.
funny. I didn't even think about that until just now. That's the guy who did it. The same person who wrote our music. Ha! What a
Wow.
wild connection that is.
Well,
I've never
guys.
told him that story. I should probably call him.
Yeah. Let's tell him to listen to this. He'll get a little props. All right, guys. Like I
Yeah.
said, we'll see you next week. This has been the Kelcast.
All right, Kel.
All right.
So I got one thing. I got one
Okay.
thing.
Okay. Bleep it up.
All right. I've had a really fucking hard time playing Hearthstone lately. A really hard time.
Yeah.
I don't now I'm not going to get super into the politics or whatever, but Blizzard's has had a rough time, and
Mm-hmm.
they have made some bad decisions. I don't I mean, that seems clear at this point.
Right. Right. Right.
I don't know all the details. It's very hard to keep up. A lot changes. There's a lot of things coming out, a lot of things that seem not to be true, a lot of things that seem to be true. But I really hope that they can find a way to make changes that allow the player base to come back I know WoW is suffering. I know Hearthstone is suffering. I understand that some other games are suffering right now. They're between their new release for old Overwatch and new Overwatch. There's just a lot of steps that are there's just a lot going on. And it seems like all the players that play Blizzard games are not making the right decisions. And or sorry, no, that was the wrong thing to say. All the players that are playing Blizzard games are leaving because Blizzard isn't making the right decisions. And I hope, I don't know, I really don't want Blizzard games to die. I love the games. I hope that something can change. I don't know what has to change, but I don't want to lose my passions, and I'm hoping that something can come back. So I don't know if something's wrong. I don't know if, I mean, we've had this before with all the China stuff. I just I don't know if this is the death knell. It certainly doesn't seem like it, but something has to change, and I hope it
Yeah.
does because I
Better be a wake
fucking
up
love
call.
Hearthstone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I fucking love Hearthstone, and I want it to come back. But right now, it's really tough. It's really tough to jump in, and yeah, I hope something changes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we can all say that for up until maybe the last 10 years, Blizzard was one of the just most iconic companies. Their games, they were famous for not making a lot of games, but when their games came out, they were like the most ready of any game. Like they might take
Right.
6, 10 years to come out with this game, but when it comes out, it is polished and it is like, and like everything that I love about Blizzard is slowly dying, and it's probably Activision, but you know, I don't, they used to never have any bugs. Like they had the most clean patches in history. Like they did. And now you look at Blizzard and like we didn't have golden cards in Arena for like 2 months. I mean, like something very minor took that long to happen. So anyway, yeah, hopefully they get it back, Um,
Hmm.
because I'll tell you one thing real quick, I still play Arena and I still love it and I enjoy it, but I'll tell you what, there's a lot of other games I'm playing right now and I'm opening myself up to trying other stuff and I'm okay with that. So, you know, they're not
Yeah.
they're at a point where they're not invulnerable. So they better
Yeah.
watch it. They better
They're
fucking
not the
watch it.
only game in town. Yeah,
Fucking
they're not
watch
the
it,
only game in
Blizzard.
town.
Just kidding. All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yep. Bye.